Jacob is a filmmaker and artist based in Los Angeles. His films comb borderlands between emerging tech ecosystems, fringe subcultures, and political ideology. He's partnered with DIS.art, the New York Times, Memory Studios, DoNotResearch, Atlas Obscura, the BBC, Warp Records, Means TV, Al Jazeera. I was actually going to say AI Al Jazeera then, but ATTN and others to make provocative films, video essays, and music videos that have been screened at museums, festivals, and theaters globally. He's the co-creator of the critically acclaimed documentary web series Far Off Sounds about obscure aesthetic musical experiences around the world. So, over to Jacob. You should have.
The name of this talk is Plane Go Up, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about the artificial intelligence apocalypse, the Boeing Corporation, and about a guy named Larry Summers, who is the guy that you see here. So apologies to what I'm assuming is mostly a British audience for the kind of America-centric focus of this story, but I suspect that many of the general points apply to both of our nations. So let me introduce the AI alignment community. Sometimes they're called the AI safety community, AI doomers, rationalists, or decelerationist, and they believe that artificial intelligence poses an existential risk to humanity. They're widely considered to be founded or spearheaded by this guy, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who is a philosopher who started the community forum Less Wrong back in 2009, which is maybe most famous widely for the Rocco's Basilisk meme. So right now I'm working on a film project, a pretty extensive film project about this world and the alarm bells that they're trying to ring to wake the world up to what they see as an imminent crisis. They are very freaked out about the direction that humanity is headed in right now. So they believe that we're collectively on a fast track to create a super intelligent AI, a computer intelligence that is not only faster and more powerful than human minds, but most concerning to them is that it's going to achieve the ability to improve its own code, to tinker with itself. So, which means that it's going to, once it reaches that place, it's over. Like, it will then grow exponentially more powerful on its own very, very rapidly, possibly without us even knowing that that's happening. So their fear is that this AI, once it reaches that level of capability, will almost certainly take over the world. And part of that, whether on purpose or as a byproduct of some other thing, will likely include killing all human beings. So you can see on the left of this slide, that's this thing they call a shogath, which is a concept which basically describes maybe something like ChatGPT, which is something that knows that it has to present a friendly face, and even if you ask it, like, "Are you going to take over the world?" It'll say, "No, I'm just a friendly computer. I don't have desires or wishes." And there are sort of levels of actual malevolence or intention sort of hidden behind that friendly mask. And on the right, those two slides are kind of depictions of this concept of a paperclip maximizer, which is a very strange concept. But one of the kind of key memes in this community, I don't know if any of you all have encountered this before, but it basically is the idea of like, okay, there's a paperclip company and they have a super intelligent AI and they give it a simple instruction, which is just like maximize the number of paperclips that you can make. We want as many paperclips for as cheap as possible. And it takes that information, runs with it, and turns the entire planet Earth into paperclips. So that's another way that it could kill all human beings, just by being really stupid, but really good at its job. This is one of Eliezer Yudkowsky's most famous quotes. I'm just kidding. I just think this image is funny, clearly made by some AI that crawls the web looking for quotes. So if we're talking about how a more self-conscious or self-aware superintelligent AI might take over the world, how could it do that? A box plugged into a wall socket somewhere. One of the more compelling and frightening examples that the alignment folks have given is this idea of nanobots, which is essentially like, okay, if it becomes really intelligent, a super intelligent AI might be able to fool or blackmail or bully or convince somehow a naive human to, let's say, order a certain synthetic DNA sequence or proteins from a lab that makes these things to order, which there are these places. And then the AI could give it instructions on what to do. And all of a sudden, you've added an enzyme to this powder or whatever, and it contains billions or trillions of nanobots, bio nanobots that can self-reproduce or something like that. They spread on the wind. Everybody breathes them in. Nobody knows about it because they're so small and they're invisible. And then, whenever the AI wants to, at the snap of a finger, everybody just drops dead. So this whole scene, this whole AI alignment world, which has been largely based, it's global. People with this concern exist all over the earth, but the community, the milieu exists largely in the Bay Area, especially in Berkeley. That's where Yudkowsky started his company, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. But it came out of a much more optimistic place. Yudkowsky and the AI alignment community, they emerged out of a group of transhumanists in the 90s called the extropians. Back in the 90s, these were the people who brought Yudkowsky and his gang into the world of tech philosophy. Yudkowsky was quite young at that time. So this was the scene that he and other AI doomers like Nick Bostrom, who wrote the central book on AI threat, they came out of this community, this 90s community. The extropians were but they were sort of the opposite of the AI safety people now. They wanted more of everything as quickly as possible. They believed that unregulated growth of technology would solve every human problem, from famine to space travel to death itself. They started cryonics facilities so they could freeze their own bodies at the exact point of death. They were certain that, and are certain that, humanity would invent a super intelligent AI that could one day wake them up, revive them, and cure whatever disease caused their bodies to die, or alternatively, upload their mind into a computer. The extropians were also, and are also, hardcore libertarians. In fact, libertarian free market economic theory was their main notion of how this brave new world would come about. They were huge fans of Ayn Rand, the Cold War era writer who argued that greed and self-interest were the only rational ways to move through the world, that any government imposition on the individual was a form of tyranny, and that rich people were smarter than everyone else and lifted society up. Because of these libertarian convictions, the extropians were some of the first people to think about crypto and digital currency, and there's strong evidence that the inventors of Bitcoin were very active on the extropians emailing list and in their Bay Area party scene. So what you see right now is actually a page straight out of Extropy magazine in 1995, showing a prototype for the digital currency, a digital currency they were imagining named after Friedrich Hayek, who is a mid-century economist who essentially, he was like the daddy of neoliberalism. Hayek became a big part of the American neoliberal revolution, which argued for the primacy of markets and finance and private property over governments and public regulation. I'm guessing this audience is somewhat familiar with this concept, but I'll do a little cursory explanation. Friedrich Hayek, Ayn Rand, and their acolytes and followers, including the extropians, believed very strongly in the power of the invisible hand, an economic concept coined by Adam Smith, to regulate markets, set prices, grow society, and spread abundance. The invisible hand is kind of this collective or cosmic intelligence made up of the interactions between self-interested private individuals. So no single human being, politician, or bureaucrat is smart enough to understand the complex market or its needs went to thinking. Only the invisible hand can do this in its infinite natural Darwinian wisdom. So in the early 2000s, Yudkowsky broke away from the extropians when he was struck by the realization that instead of saving the world, this AI that they were rushing towards could and would kill everyone once it was unleashed, unless it was carefully aligned with human values before it got smart. But I think that even though he broke away from the extropians and this whole movement kind of like split off, I think many of the ideological and the politically libertarian and even a lot of the sort of techno-optimism aspects of the extropians remained up to this day in the modern AI alignment and rationalist world. Even though it is ideologically diverse, somewhat counterintuitively, I think most people involved in AI alignment or AI safety who think that an unregulated AI will kill everyone still think that technology is great, that an AI will help us live forever, that the invisible hand of the market is still the best way to reach prosperity, and that the tech sector is doing the best work on Earth. They just think we need to work really, really hard to align AI with what humans want, or it's going to end the world. As I've been diving into the production of this film, and I talk about this story with friends and family and collaborators, many people ask if I believe in this vision of an AI apocalypse. I don't know. I really don't. I think that these are very, very smart people who make some incredibly compelling and nuanced arguments. And one of the reasons to make a documentary at all is to ask questions, to remain open, and to find out what you believe. But in my opinion right now, one way of looking at it is that this anxiety generally, that a cold, inhuman intelligence of our own design will take control over the direction of the world and wreak havoc on human society and on our lives, has already happened. And I think it's possible that AI doom, apocalyptic anxiety, regardless of whether these folks might be right about what a superintelligence would do in the future, that this might be a kind of displaced anxiety, and ultimately maybe even somewhat comforting projection, because it fits into a tight sci-fi narrative mold of the apocalypse. But what I want to talk about today is what if this angst is maybe more universal than this community, and maybe even more banal. This feeling of being out of control, of being surrounded by opaque systems and machinery which could kill us in an instant or take us to paradise, I think it's kind of similar to sitting in an airplane. I also think it's an expression of something much larger on top of that. What I think is happening is that we're all on an airplane that is falling apart in the sky. There are many names that have been given to this phenomenon, including late-stage capitalism and shitification, or as Daniel Felstead, who invited me to give this talk, has called it, janky capitalism.
Oh my God, it's on fire.
This phenomenon can be annoying, it can be funny, it can be totally banal, or it can be downright terrifying, sometimes all these things at once.
Mom.
But I think in some ways, yeah, it's pertinent to the AI alignment question. So I want to talk about Boeing. All these videos are from Boeing airplanes within the past month. They've been falling apart in the sky. You probably read about this. The two videos that are playing now, these two videos were just from, they're from, one was from an Alaska Airlines flight where a chunk of the plane just flew off mid-flight. Another one, the second one, was a cargo plane that caught fire over Florida. And there have been a growing number of these incidences lately, including at Davos, where the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's Boeing 747 was grounded due to mechanical safety concerns. Besides these recent viral sort of non-lethal incidents of planes crumbling in the sky and making emergency landings, there were two tragic catastrophes in 2018 and 2019 when poorly programmed AI safety systems took over Boeing jets in Indonesia and Ethiopia, causing them to hurtle towards the earth, killing all the crew and passengers. At first, Boeing executives tried to blame the pilots, but it quickly became apparent that the problem was with the company itself. For many decades throughout the 20th century, Boeing was the creme de la creme of airline companies, the engineers company, the jet setters brand, the exemplar of American ingenuity, craft, and power. Boeing builds the Air Force One, the president's plane, the F-15 fighter jet, the Apache attack helicopter, and more. Cost be damned, time be damned. Boeing rose to dominance by promising to build the coolest, the fastest, the safest, the most impressive aircraft on Earth. And they did that until they didn't do that. This change began in the late 70s and early 80s with the deregulation of the airline industry. Jimmy Carter signed the Airline Deregulation Act in 1978, which marked literally the first time in US history that an industry was deregulated. Ronald Reagan, a few years later, took this policy even further. Government oversight over the airline industry was dramatically diminished. The act was a watershed moment. Perhaps one might call it the official birthday of what we now call the neoliberal era. The invisible hand at that time was ascending the throne of the American economy, taking over from the feeble, sentimental human minds who had previously been in charge of guiding and regulating it. This was a new orthodoxy, which was being widely accepted in the halls of power and corporate boardrooms, and with it, a sector of the economy which had been restrained since the Great Depression was reprioritized and unleashed. What I'm referring to is the financial sector. Wall Street became the new alpha, leading the CEOs and boards on a leash made of the little line on their stock ticker to advance the interests and desires of shareholders over the country, communities, employees, and even their own customers. Chase the line go up. Meanwhile, at this same time, there was this young Harvard economist named Larry Summers, who was rapidly climbing the ladder that connects the world of government and finance. He started under Ronald Reagan as a staff economist. Then he became chief economist at the World Bank. Finally, Summers was appointed Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. And it was here where he made friends with Alan Greenspan, the guy on the right, who was besties with Ayn Rand, the author, and a hardcore free market libertarian. Under Clinton, Summers tag-teamed with his new buddy Alan Greenspan to push this free market agenda, systematically disempowering government from regulating private industry, especially the financial industry. Summers and Greenspan's project achieved climax with the repeal of Glass-Steagall, a move which Clinton is still deeply criticized for. This repeal dramatically deregulated Wall Street and the investment banks, pouring gasoline on the fire of the dominance and power of the financial sector above all other sectors of the economy. It was in the middle of this kind of heady neoliberal revolution and the total unleashing of finance that a merger was approved between Boeing and a smaller airplane manufacturer, McDonnell Douglas. This was 1997. This merger would change airplanes forever. McDonnell Douglas's CEO was this guy named Stonecipher. And weirdly, after the merger, he took over as leader of Boeing. This guy had been trained by General Electric CEO Jack Welch, who was famous for doing these massive layoffs, these cutbacks, outsourcing, union crushing, and generally cutting costs in every conceivable way. And through this, he had turned General Electric, GE, from one of the highest reputation electrical engineering firms on earth into a cutthroat corporate business fixated on shareholder returns and largely unconcerned with innovation or quality goods. You know, when do you go online and you're like, what's the new GE light bulb, right? Like this used to be a thing. Everybody would get the new GE product. Now it's nothing. So now this new CEO of Boeing, Stonecipher, who Jack Welch had trained, did this same thing with Boeing. One of his first moves was to move Boeing headquarters from Seattle, where its workforce was unionized and taxes were higher, to Chicago and to start manufacturing in South Carolina, also to avoid organized labor, and to shutter or outsource much of what Boeing used to do in-house to save labor costs and speed up production. I just think it's funny that they tried to make a plane called the Globemaster, which never really went anywhere. A few years later, in an interview, Stonecipher would say, "When people say I changed the culture of Boeing, that was the intent, so that it's run like a business rather than a great engineering firm." This was emblematic of what was happening all over the country and the world at this time. Where the goal used to be a superior product, the mandate from Wall Street was now very clear. The goal was something called RONA, or return on net assets. These changes were encouraged and quietly egged on by neoliberals in the government, who systematically deregulated these industries and starved the regulating agencies of funding and power. One of the most glaring places where this austerity happened was at the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA are the ones who are supposed to make sure planes are safe and don't crash. Their mandate includes making sure the planes are being built to the best safety standards. Starting in the 90s, this power began shrinking along with funding for agencies like the FAA. Whereas before, the FAA would send their safety inspectors to, for instance, a Boeing plant to keep an eye on the process and sign off on the company's safety practices, today the situation is much different. Now, the people inspecting Boeing's planes are no longer hired by or interact with anyone at the FAA. They are hired, paid, and supervised by the Boeing company itself. Legally, these inspectors are considered to be authorized representatives of the FAA and to serve as government-mandated safety inspectors. They report their findings to Boeing management, who then are the ones who report findings to the FAA. The FAA, the government agency, never steps foot inside of a Boeing facility. This has naturally resulted in multiple reported instances of safety inspectors being threatened to revise their reports and to approve unsafe or sloppy practices by the people with the power to fire or replace them. This resulted from pressure within the FAA itself, from management, to delegate more and more tasks to Boeing as the FAA's budget was shrunk and their staff spread increasingly thin. So who's at fault for these crumbling vessels, these crashes? No single human being. Representative Peter DeFazio, chairman of the House Transportation Committee, which led an investigation into these crashes, found, quote, "They started watching Wall Street. They started tying executive bonuses to stock performance. A Boeing employee working on the MAX wrote to a colleague, quote, 'This airplane is designed by clowns who are in turn supervised by monkeys.' But I don't think that this is unique to Boeing. The workers skipping important precautionary steps and taking shortcuts would love to make a high-quality product, but they are certainly not to blame. They're doing what the safety inspectors have approved for them to do. The safety inspectors would love to ensure a safe airplane, but are reliant on management for their jobs. They can only approve what they're told to approve. The manager would love to take pride in his product, but is responding to orders and pressure from the C-suite to speed up delivery and cut costs at every opportunity. The VPs would love to make Boeing known once again for great engineering, but are getting insane pressure from the CEOs along with the incentives of bonuses tied to stock prices. The CEO would love to make Boeing great, safe, and well-loved again, and would get all the credit for doing so, but is under constant pressure from the board of directors, who keep sending him stock price updates. The board of directors wants air travel to be safe and comfortable, just like everybody else does, but their primary duty is to shareholder value. And no matter what they'd personally prefer, they are compelled to follow that logic and press for return on net asset. And of course, airline consumers would much rather have a robust safety and engineering process in place and rigorously enforced, but there really are no alternatives to Boeing airplanes in the USA. So there are literally, I would say, no human beings anywhere who want the airplane manufacturing process to look like this. So who does want it? This is the boss, the unfeeling market logic of the spiky line, a super-intelligent algorithm with nobody's well-being in mind, the invisible hand. In 2005, at an annual meeting of central bankers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, an Indian economist named Raghuram Rajan delivered a talk with remarkable foresight. So this was 2005, just 3 years before the global market crash. He talked about how the US financial system was incredibly vulnerable to a crash because of the dismantling of the regulatory state under the guidance of economists like Larry Summers and Alan Greenspan. He warned that the current deregulated financial system gave investment bankers huge cash incentives to take incredible risks with other people's money while risking no penalties for any subsequent losses. Rajan, uniquely it seems, saw in 2005 that something very bad was slouching over the horizon. Summers then stood up in a stinging, contemptuous rebuttal. He compared the increasing complexity and prosperity of the financial sector to the development of transportation technology over the centuries, suggesting that, as a metaphor, even though plane crashes are much more dramatic and horrifying than, for instance, a car crash or a horse and buggy accident, they are so much less frequent than accidents before, and the benefit we get from the technology is so great that it's an overwhelming net positive, just like, he argued, the tremendous flourishing of the financial sector. Like an airplane, argued Summers at this 2005 meeting, a financial crash might look horrible, but benefited way more people than it ever harmed. He then turned to Raghuram Rajan and called him a, quote, Luddite, for questioning the inherent wisdom and enduring stability of the American financial sector. Only a few years later, the entire system would collapse, dragging millions of average people and homeowners down with it. Summers, now in the Obama administration, would fight to make sure that American homeowners couldn't get out of their risky mortgage debt and keep their homes. Millions were kicked out onto the street. The AI risk doomers are sometimes also accused of being Luddites, but of course, it's far more complex than that. OpenAI, arguably the most important new big tech startup today, was actually formed out of the AI alignment milieu. They came about as a way to make sure that dangerous AI wasn't developed in secret, but that the technology was rather done safely and in the open, hence their name, OpenAI. When some of the OpenAI board realized that maybe that wasn't happening and that profit motive had overtaken AI safety as a priority, just a few months ago in late 2023, the board created a firestorm controversy in Silicon Valley by firing the CEO, Sam Altman, who's, as you probably know, a rock star, sort of like very famous figurehead of this new AI bloom. Within days, pressure from shareholders and large corporate partners like Microsoft, as well as internal revolt from the OpenAI staff, resulted in a whiplash reversal. Sam Altman was rehired as the CEO, and most of the board was forced out and replaced by new board members. One of the new OpenAI board members is Larry Summers. So, working on this film project, a lot of people, friends, collaborators, family, ask me if I believe that there will be an AI apocalypse. Do I take this seriously? I really don't know. Nobody will ever know. If it doesn't happen, it will always be a potentiality. If it does happen, there won't be anyone left to know that it happened. I do think that there are strong arguments on both sides of this issue, and the people putting them out there are very smart. But I also think that this anxiety of being on a runaway train, a crumbling jet with no live human being or group of humans accountable to us, where the people who are supposed to protect us threw up their hands in a shrug and let go of the wheel, it's an ambient source of terror more generally, and perhaps some kind of a projection or a symptom of something bigger. I think it's something that we're all collectively waking up to. And with it, all sorts of strange manifestations are going to crop up along the way. This is where I will stop the slide presentation.
I mean, I've got like a couple of questions. One, I guess they fall into two camps. Like one is to do with, I guess, like AI, in the use of AI in your own practice, and sort of, I'm curious to know sort of like how, if at all, the development of AI tools and models, etc., have sort of changed how you work, and in what way? This is a very sort of more of a sort of like practical or sort of practice-based sort of question. So yeah, I guess like that's the first question, just in terms of your practice and filmmaking process, and sort of how AI, if it has at all, sort of had an impact in terms of how you make your films.
I mean, besides being a kind of overriding metaphor that's useful in some ways.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like, I mean, my second type of question is more to do with like content and the kind of narrative, but I guess like just in a more sort of practice-based sort of process of like, through image making, etc., that kind of thing.
I will say one thing that has been revolutionary in the filmmaking process from AI is, I don't know if anybody here uses Adobe Premiere as a video editing tool, but I shoot a lot of very long interviews and long scenes, especially when I'm shooting documentaries, and something that you used to have to pay for either a human being to do it, or later than that, a service that specializes in this kind of software. Now it's built into Premiere, which is transcript. And it will auto transcript everything that everybody says. And not only that, but it's really incredible. You can like edit video based on the words. So like select words, move them around, and actually create video from that. So I've become very collaborative with AI in that sense. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of reminded me of last year. This time last year, we had a similar summit that was looking at, I guess, like creative practice and the body and AI, and we had Kealdo McDowell on, who also was calling in from California at a similar time of the day as well, obviously, and they were talking about how actually, a lot of these kind of AI models they've already been built into a lot of like technologies that we use without knowing that we're engaging with kind of AI models. So they were referring to just to, I guess, like social media and the feed just as itself is kind of machine intelligence that is kind of responding to our behaviors and so forth. So it's just kind of interesting in terms of, on a certain level, on I guess like a practical level, just how these models and systems are already embedded and baked in a lot of the kind of technologies and systems that we already kind of use without knowing that we're like working with AI as such. But
definitely, there's a famous quote in the AI development community. I don't remember who said it, but it's that AI, the term AI is just a term used for whatever is not possible yet by computers. It doesn't really have a strict definition, and it's always kind of a future-facing term. But we've been using AI basically since whatever. Like, I mean, I would argue AI, like the invisible hand as an economic theory, is a form of AI. Like we've been using kind of like putting our faith in non-human sort of quantitative entities for a very long time. But they're in a more technical sense, they've been embedded in our computers for decades now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess actually that leads on to a question about your presentation, and I guess I don't know. I'm trying to work out like how to phrase this as a question, but I was really interested when you were making this comparison. Well, it seemed to me that you were making this comparison between the market and as this kind of like super intelligent system. I think there was like, I can't remember who it was, but there's a theorist who talks about I guess like neoliberalism and the market, and they say like one of the definitions of like neoliberalism is this kind of belief that the market is inherently more intelligent than any human being. So it is like it operates as this kind of like super intelligence thing, and the kind of neoliberal kind of belief is in this kind of the kind of higher intelligence of the market. So I guess in a way it's like just to confirm, I guess like in your presentation and in possibly like the film that you're making, is that one of the things that you're exploring? Is this kind of relationship between the ideologies and beliefs of AI and this connection to the market?
Definitely, yeah. I don't think it's an accident that the people who are most deeply involved with AI research, both the people making it and the people trying to fight against it, and the sort of AI safety people, come out of this milieu that was very explicitly focused on the market. Like I showed in my presentation, they were like creating little bucks with like economist Friedrich Hayek's face on them. Like there's a deep ideological connection, I think, between the technology and the community that technology came out of, and yeah, market ideology, neoliberal market ideology, and it's something that I'm constantly working to unearth and explore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like that seems like a common like thread throughout your work and your films, is this kind of like trying to unearth or sort of like unpack some of these kind of sometimes obscure connections between characters and sort of events. I mean, the connection with Boeing and Larry Summers is like, yeah, super interesting. Does anyone have any? Oh yeah, Jen.
I've just heard that.
Can you hear? Can you hear the question?
Maybe repeat.
No, could you repeat it after she says
Oh yeah,
it?
yeah.
I guess I don't know if it's confidential, but I was really interested to know, because you mentioned earlier, Daniel, about interviewing people from Less Wrong, and I guess I see them as kind of like internet personalities now, being quite popular on Twitter, and there are certain names that float around quite a lot. What is it like making a documentary about them, and is there a teaser for some of their philosophies or interesting stories around them?
So the question was around the Less Wrong personalities, and the sort of, I guess, like, yeah, them having somewhat of a internet celebrity status. And Jen was asking, because we know that you're sort of currently making this film that where you have interviewed or spent some time with them. I guess, like, is there any like insights into their philosophies and their sort of, I guess, like, characteristics? Because they do seem a very sort of odd or sort of a mysterious kind of group of people. So I guess, like, yeah, have you any sort of teasers for us around that community or group of people?
Yeah, I've been talking extensively with some of the people on Less Wrong, including Eliezer, who started it. I wish this wasn't being recorded, because, well, no, I'm glad it's being recorded.
We can edit out this bit if you want. This we can.
I just have to be so careful, because we're still trying to convince certain people to participate in the documentary, and I know that this is going online. I will say this. Yeah, it's been really fascinating. My takeaway is that talking to these people, I forget what the schematic is for left brain versus right brain. I'm a very squishy person when it comes to how I look at the world and how I sort of like formulate worldview or whatever, and talking to people that spend a lot of time on these rationalist forums is kind of intimidating. They're some of the smartest people I've ever talked to. They're very like hyper analytical and really good at kind of like embedding concept within concepts, and they have their own very kind of like a language that's indigenous to this platform, and it's been fascinating. I don't know how much more specific I can get, but.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Try to frame it in a way that you can repeat.
Yeah.
Around, so there was this idea or this video shown of the Boeing plane with the door falling off, which is like not quite as bad as the plane crashes, and the plane crashes are not quite as bad as the entire airplane industry, like killing everyone who gets on a plane every single time. So like. And then the kind of rationalist approach, or the doomer approach, is that AI will turn everything into paperclips. It's like an immediate and terrifying approach. It's like the world will become paperclips and we're doomed, and it's coming soon and it's very quick. Whereas like this kind of janky fall of the airplane industry is quite slow, quite gradual, and quite piece by piece. So I wonder what the kind of, if there's a sense of like time in this, like of understanding how the kind of doom might actually happen, and what the sort of door falling off of the plane is in AI terms. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and feel like also like I'm translating, like in like a.
I think I was able to pick that one up. Actually.
Oh, okay. Oh, perfect. Oh, excellent.
So you're basically, just if I understand, you're asking how to kind of map this much slower kind of crumbling, janky capitalism process onto the analogy of AI doom, which essentially is, in their idea, is going to happen really quickly. And how do you kind of like compare these two things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of, I was kind of bummed out. I missed a slide early on in the beginning where I addressed this a little bit, and it threw me up a little bit halfway through when I realized I had done this. But I think that the AI alignment scenario exists to some extent, first of all, because it's possible. Like, I do think that there is a way in which that they're right, and that this is a deep concern to actually have about creating super intelligent computer systems. But also because it's just much more satisfying. It's much more cathartic and climactic than what's actually happening. And so I think what you're saying is right, that like this crumbling feeling, this like door flying off, or like a wing catches fire, but you're able to emergency land. Just, even going on an airplane and realizing that like everything has been made like 3.5 inches less space for you to sit in, just everything kind of getting shittier around us. There's no grand battle. There's no huge Hollywood movie in that, and it's much harder to reconcile what to do about that. So in some sense, I think that the quickness and the kind of like huge explosion of the AI apocalypse, you can't really map them, and it exists as a way to make it maybe more accessible or satisfying to the human mind.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any other questions? I guess if not, I have maybe two final questions. So one of the questions, I guess, again, going back to the use of AI as a thing, and I guess in your process, I guess this is more to do with kind of narrative. I guess earlier we were talking about this, I guess, possible sort of tension between AI and the ability to kind of construct narratives, and I guess understanding narratives in some way as inherently connected to the production of kind of meaning, or creating kind of meaning out of events in some way. So I guess in a way, with your work, and as you demonstrated in the presentation, you have this kind of, I would say, this amazing ability to construct narratives out of kind of these events that seemingly aren't connected or wouldn't on the surface be connected. So I was kind of, in a way, I was kind of curious in terms of, again, how do you see AI work, having implications in terms of the way in which you construct narratives? And that's a kind of on a technical level, or do you see sort of AI having kind of impacts in terms of the stories or events that you will then construct narratives out of? Does that make sense? Is that a coherent question?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm trying to think of how to answer it in a way that isn't just blatantly obvious. And I'm making a film about AI, so it definitely has impacted how I look at narratives, especially this narrative. I don't know. I don't really engage with generative AI chatbots when it comes to narrative, and I have not yet really engaged with AI as a graphics or as an imaging tool very often, although there were some slides in this presentation that were generated by AI, either by other people or one that I made by myself. So it can be very useful. But yeah, I don't know. It's a deep question, and it's a good question. I really like it, this question of making meaning out of everything, because that is the kind of philosophical essence of AI, is it just takes everything in, digests, it takes in porn and IKEA catalogs and everything on Wikipedia, and just crumbles it into a ball and makes meaning out of it. And I think that's fascinating, and it draws me toward the subject matter. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly how I would say it would change my own narrative practice.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I think, but this is a very particular reading of your work itself. Is almost it has a sort of AI quality to it, in the sense of bringing these kind of dispersed things and putting them together. But obviously in your case, what results is a thing that has this kind of coherent narrative to it. You know, like this thread between AI, Boeing, Larry Summers, OpenAI. So, you know, like there's a kind of like thread. I mean, that makes sense. You know, where often I guess with AI it doesn't. You know, it is just often this kind of like mixing together of stuff.
That's true. Although I mean, I'm sure you've spent time talking to ChatGPT or whatever. I do think maybe in some ways what you're saying, this kind of stream of consciousness way of like connecting things that aren't naturally, you know, narratively connected to each other. I don't think, maybe it's like counter AI work in the sense that I don't think that these AI systems really have the capability, at least yet, to do that kind of thing. They really like, the way that these LLMs work is they're literally measuring distance between concepts and ideas in their map. And so like if two things are too far apart, they probably would avoid connecting them.
Yeah. And then the final question, which we're asking everyone in some form or other, and I guess like I was thinking about it in relation to your presentation about the sort of like crumbling bodies of the Boeing planes. Obviously, the theme of the summit is around fashion, AI, and the body, or our bodies. So I guess the final sort of question is really around how do you see a sort of what the potential effect or impact or implications of AI is on our individual, collective bodies and or sort of sense of self-identity, etc.?
I think it depends who you are and who wins what battles in the coming years. You know, I think that AI has, like you said earlier, AI has already had a huge impact on our sense of self and our sense of bodily presence and autonomy, I think stretching all the way back to, let's say, 2006 when Facebook introduced the newsfeed, sort of changed from profile-based to newsfeed-based, and we were all of a sudden kind of like flowing down a river of AI that we'd never really experienced before. And that I do think has deeply, of course, changed our sense of self. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's the most literal answer, which is that like if AI does well and is you know in the most optimistic view of the future, it's going to change the way we live bodily quite a bit. You know, in terms of like medical interventions, therapies, cryogenics, I guess, freezing, and like you know, adding robot parts to our hearts and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't quite thought about it in those terms before, so I don't know if I have a ready answer for that. It's an interesting.
So maybe the final question, just off the back, was like how as a filmmaker or as a storyteller, are you excited or hopeful about this increasing sort of embedding of kind of AI in our lives and the influence of AI? I'm just not either from a sort of that, like, from the things that you talked about, but also the potential sort of like material, like raw material for interesting stories and narratives. So like, I guess like as a filmmaker, like how hopeful or are you of this kind of the increasing kind of implications of AI from a storyteller perspective?
Well, I think storytellers and filmmakers are typically on the margins, and I think on the margins, AI is going to be fantastic. Like obviously, we've already seen so much incredible work starting to come out of just the primitive generative AI that already exists. More widely, I would say I'm more scared, and I think the technology takes the shape of the power structures around it, and so as long as the power structures exist, as long as the incentive structure of like the invisible hand of late stage capitalism or whatever you want to call it is still the guiding force of the larger systems, that I think AI is going to kind of like take on that shape and probably be used to entrench and I don't know, like further intensify whatever that is. So in that sense, I'm a little bit less optimistic.
Yeah. Great. So I think that's it. So thanks very much, Jacob. It was a really super fascinating presentation and great to chat with you. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you.